but I think we can start. All right, good evening. I would like to call to order the Board of Library Trustees Committee of the Whole meeting for this Monday, October 7th, 2024. May I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Burrell?
Here.
Trustee Gala?
Here.
Trustee Kelly?
Here.
Trustee Rule? Trustee Meadow?
Here.
Trustee Rule is currently not here. Trustee Zick?
Here.
President Samar?
Here. Could we please stand for the pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment? No? No one's here? All right. Looking forward to hearing from Mike and Tracy to review the proposed budget for 2025.
Yeah, so I would ask Tracy to join us at the
Yeah.
table. She can go over the changes since our last discussion, and then we'll talk about tax levy.
Okay. So at the September POW, we went draft 1. So today we'll look at what I kind of refer to as draft 2. And there's really only been a small handful of changes since the first draft. So I'll focus, my comments on those changes, and then we'll spend some time, like Mike said, discussing the levy. But of course, if you have questions on any of the details in here, just stop me anytime, and we can talk about any questions you might have. So just to kind of summarize what you have in your packet, you have similar to the September POW, you have the budget memo, then page 1 is the budget summary, and then pages 2 through 18 are all those individual department budgets. And for each of those, just as a reminder, you see that we put a note for every single account where there's an add-on or a transfer that's been approved and included in the draft for the next year budget, just so that you can kind of see what those things are. And then we've again included an updated long-range fiscal plan that corresponds to this draft of the budget, ties to it, and then new in your materials for the October committee of the whole that you did not have in September is the beginning pages of our section of the Village's budget book. So those include a cover page, a current org chart for the library, and then a draft of the budget narrative. And that is just a couple of pages that sort of introduces the library's schedule and tells the reader where they can tell information. So I'm just going to start with the changes to the memo and the budget itself. So the numbers, of course, have all been updated on the memo to tie to the budget schedules, but the one, big significant change, which I know we'll talk about more in a minute, relates to the tax levy assumption that we're using in this draft as compared to the last draft. So based on previous conversations, we're recommending a 0 to 3% levy increase beginning in the 2025 budget year, and the current draft budget in your packs is using that highest 3% assumption right now, just so that you can see what that were to look like. So that would give the library, if you're looking at the budget schedules, kind of the summary page on page 1 is sort of where I'm at. It would give the library approximately $445,000 extra per year to work with on the revenue side. So you can kind of see that in that first line of the budget summary on page 1. And then just an FYI, we do expect to receive 100% of our property tax revenue budget in both 2024 and 2025. And that's because we no longer budget for that 2% loss cost factor, even though it is added to the tax bills when the bills are extended to residents. So in the past, we would budget for the levy plus the factor, and then we would collect about 98% of that number. But you will remember last year, we changed that, the village changed that too. So we only budget for the base levy. And then because they added 2%, we do expect to now collect 100% of budget, basically. So then looking at our expenditures over revenues number in this draft, you also probably remember in the draft 1 in September, we were showing a budgeted deficit of around $952,000. And we talked about how, expenses are rising every year, some very quickly in our current economy, while our main source of revenue stayed flat for a really long time. So that growing deficit didn't really surprise us. It's somewhat inevitable over time. But in this draft, you can now see that we're budgeting a deficit of only 308,000. That you can kind of see that between the lines that are marked B and C. In that third column, $307,828. And that's due to this draft again, showing that 3% levy increase, of course, but there was also a few other favorable impacts from a few other things that changed between draft 1 and draft 2 as well. So first, we did receive an updated budget figure from the village. This is that time of budget season where we double, triple check all the numbers that we share, get charged from the village. And so we received an updated number for PPRT revenue from them. So that had a $55,000 favorable impact on that number. And then we also met internally with administration and HR. And this is the time of year we do this every year in budget season where we look really closely at any open positions that the library has. And, talk about whether or not those can be released from next year's budget, include the managers and some of those conversations. And this year, that whole process had a $141,000 favorable impact between draft 1 and draft 2. So that saves some money in the budget as well. And then finally, we did a bunch of other little various small cleanup things that netted down to small but still favorable impact that brought us down to that current deficit of only 308,000 versus that about 950,000 deficit we looked at in the first draft. And just a reminder, so we have budgeted a deficit for at least the past 9 years. And it's ranged from like 220,000 all the way up to like about 900,000. And then in each of those years, we did still come in favorable in, our actual results. 2024 is that first year where we're projecting that we won't come in favorable. We'll be pretty close, it would be a small unfavorable result that we're anticipating. But it's just not quite enough favorability on the expense side to make up that large budgeted deficit in 2024. Just a few other changes, notes since the last draft to this one is within the general fund, we treat up all the personnel costs during this time of year. And also the medical insurance spread by department to reflect all of the most current personnel information that we have for as far as staff rates, as far as their staff selections at this moment in time, but the total charge to the library didn't change at all. So there's no impact, no change between the two drafts. It just means that, you'll see some swings in the department level budgets if you were to look at them compared to last year or compared to the first draft. But the current draft has all the most up-to-date information on that. And some of those things would be partially related to either staff turning over or changing their selections, but it also is the impact of us moving to that 4-tier benefit structure. So we found out that many of the staff in the different departments who had been on a family, plan under the 2-tier structure really just had coverage for employee plus spouse. So then their department would get like a smaller piece of the pie under a 4-tier structure. In fact, overall, the library really didn't benefit from that change to a 4-tier structure. So you might remember back at target time and in the medical insurance presentation that our broker was anticipating a double-digit 10-point increase in premiums and those costs that would be allocated to the library. But what actually got allocated to the library is only a 7% increase. So that was really great to see. And that was all just because of the mix of our staff selections. They were either on lower costs or on not true family plans, like really just like a lot of them are employee plus stuff. So it really helped keep kind of our personnel line in check. But again, no change between in the dollar amount being allocated to the library between drafts. Then on the capital side, the only other changes were that we shifted that placeholder for the partnership with the park district for the Belmont parking lot from this year to next year, since we're looking at doing that in the spring. And then we slightly increased the estimate for the bookmobile by $50,000. Again, that's sort of a placeholder for now. We're not sure the timing of when we'll actually get that vehicle. I'll pause there for questions about anything so far, anything that maybe in the individual department pages or just before I go on to the long range fiscal plan here. Okay, I will keep going. So behind the budget schedules then is an updated long range fiscal plan. And like I said, that corresponds to this draft of the budget and then shows a few years of, shows that 3% that we talked about, the kind of highest end of the range we're looking at meeting. And then a few years of small levy increases like beyond that to sort of build our long-term position just very gradually over time. So under this scenario, the fund looks very healthy and, you know, as we continue to look further out, it looks similar to kind of what we've seen when we were experiencing a lot of favorability in our actual numbers year over year. And then when we get to the, I don't know, when we get to the next agenda item or whenever you like, we can talk about the levy. There are a couple of other scenarios later on in your materials that we can look at all. And then behind that, we have the budget narrative. Like I said, it introduces the library section of the final budget book once it's printed for inclusion with the villages. And we try to keep this document really simple. It was changed a few years ago. A lot of materials seem very redundant to other, like things like our strategic plan and our website. So we pared it down quite a bit. So instead we include summary and then some brief web addresses where readers can go to find more detailed information if they wish. There are a couple, I think there's like one highlighted piece of information that'll be updated before we bring it back for your approval at the next meeting.
Right, that's a lot.
Yeah, and we can talk about, we can jump into tax levy or I can pause,
Yeah,
or whatever you like.
let's pause for a second. I have a question about capital projects. So, you know, these are things that, we deem necessary. My one question is about the carpeting. Or I'm sorry, the lighting. The lighting is obviously a really, high price ticket item. I am wondering if that's something that we could do in phases, or is it something that we could do over 2 fiscal years, like do it in December, January, until some of the budget money goes to 1 year and some of the next?
Yeah, we could
How-
split that up.
yeah.
We're covering a lot of square footage in the proposed
Yeah.
project for next year. It's not everything, but it's pretty much most of the public space. And a lot of the office space. So if we wanted to split that up, and I don't see a problem with doing that.
I mean, I guess my concern or, you know, question is just that we're really jumping up the capital next year by a lot, and I'm just wondering if we can spread that out a little more.
Yeah.
Of these items, obviously, the bookmobile is our highest priority, the servers and Wi-Fi. Of the interior, you know, of the renovation stuff, of the renovation projects, what do you see as the most important?
I think finishing up restrooms would
Yeah.
probably be our highest priority. And then probably updating some of the carpeting. We do have some areas that carpeting is just looking really well.
Right,
And,
it's
you know, our
beautiful.
customers see that, we want
Yeah,
to, it really
Okay.
nice. And then, you know, whatever we can find out for next year as far as
right,
ceiling and lighting, I think that would be.
okay,
Well, didn't you say that we may not get the bookmobile next year? Maybe
probably-
ordered,
yeah, we probably
will be
will.
ordered, probably have to do a down payment, but it might not come until 26.
Correct. Yeah, maybe even later, they're saying.
Oh, 2 years.
So,
So
Yeah.
there's a cushion there.
Yep.
Anyone else?
Talking about the tax.
Yeah, all right, let's go into the text.
Yeah, so for purposes of that discussion, I mean, it's sort of under the agenda item, it's all sort of one topic, but, I've included an alternate version of both the budget summary and the long-range fiscal plan, which shows no increase for the 2025 budget year, but then some small increases beginning with the 2026 budget year. And then also shared today via email with a third version where it's a 0% increase over the long term. So you have both of those in your materials. And in both of those, the cells that are highlighted in blue, those are the only things that's different to the main one in the pack. You know, so most of the numbers are not changing at all. It's really just that one assumption, and you can see the downstream effects on the fund balance, as well as the amounts that we have available to set aside for future capital projects. Because those are kind of the two things you have to consider. The revenue growing or not growing, depending on which version you're looking at. But then that also dictates how much we have available to kind of fund our capital projects as well.
All right, I have some thoughts on the budget, but why don't, or on the levy, but I know other people do too, so, who would like to go first? Right, go ahead.
Oh, okay, it's always a lot of hard work and thank you for crunching all these numbers and getting the 0% levy one going here. First question, and line G for the estimate for the total rev or expenses. Or no, I'm sorry, M, for the total expenses there, for the estimate 15,897. Is that, I apologize, probably should look this up, but is that the budget number or is that the number that we think we're going to get to?
That's the number we think we're going to get to.
Okay.
So in the very first draft of the long range fiscal plan, you guys would have seen, it wouldn't have been yet because we don't have projected numbers yet, but now we do have projections from the managers. So that's been updated for what we actually expect.
Okay, because we split this up years ago, right? The general fund and capital projects fund, you know, it used to all just be lumped into one thing because we wanted to be able to look at what we really needed to operate the building and operate it as is. And then the other fund was basically the larger things that we wanted to do over the years. So not saying that those were nice to have, but they weren't the necessary things to keep the lights on and keep the services going on a yearly basis. So when I heard the other day that we were considering doing a 3% levy, you know, this year, obviously, we've been great, you know, not doing this for so many years. And we all knew that there was going to be a crack at some point where we were going to have to wind up doing that. But the only question that I would have though, is as you said before, we've gone 9 years where our projected expenses were actually underneath what we budgeted. So we've always had a surplus at the end of every year, and we've always grown this, and we have to, and that line R, you know, our policy is it has to be 33% or above.
Mm-hmm.
And with this one with the 0%, you've got it at 2028 when we finally, you know, break that threshold.
Mm-hmm.
The question I would ask before I could vote on saying yes to a 3% next year was I would want us to take a look into, and Amy, I think this is where we're getting at. If not, I'm going to just take it, this is where you were getting at, to look at these capital fund projects and see what is absolutely necessary for the years to come. And do we have to, can we spread it out a little bit more to where we don't have to do this, you know, at any one point and push this down the road as much as we possibly can. I know this is coming from somebody, this is my last time talking here, so I didn't have to deal with this going further. I get that. And I apologize for that. But at the same time, I would like us to really take a dive into that capital projects, because one of the reasons why it does go down so much is because we're doing a transfer. That money is just coming directly from us already from that capital fund. Do we need to do that? So that would be my request before I could vote on doing any kind of increase, that we have actually done the dive to say, okay, this is actually what we can do and what we have to do with these years coming up.
I'll say most of the capital projects that we've been doing in the past few years have been projects that have been kicked down the road. We've had the lighting and ceiling replacement on our long range plan for probably 10 years. We've been looking to make those changes. Fluorescent lighting, I believe, is going away. It's going to be much harder to get the bulbs. So that is one of the drivers for this, as well as, energy efficiency and stuff like that. Is it a must do? Have to have? It may not be. But like the restrooms and even the restrooms next year, those restrooms they're getting pretty old, and they're definitely showing their age.
Mm-hmm.
And like the HVAC equipment that we've been replacing, we've gone beyond the useful life of that equipment to kick the can down the road as much as we possibly can. And so I feel like we are playing catch up over these past couple of years, trying to make sure that our equipment is reliable and efficient. And so I would say the lighting ceiling one is probably the one that's most negotiable as far as, kicking it down the road a little, or at least phasing it, kick it down a little further.
The fact that you said that you repeated my words, kicking it down the road. It didn't sound right, and I apologize for that if that didn't come out right. But if there are things like the lighting, I look at it, and I'm not going to make a value judgment on whether we need to do that or not now. You know, can we still operate the library with the lighting the way it is and still provide the same high quality of service and get our 5-star rating, you know, with it? My gut feeling is yes, okay, but how do we, you know, but at certain points you do have to do things like that. You have to kind of think about what we can do. The other thing that I have, the other point that I have here is just, and this is something I've been harping, I think, since day one, or I've been saying it since day one, sorry, no words, sometimes they'll come out as nice as I want them to. Here is the way we look at operating expenses on here. Now, I look at the actual operating expenses, we're going to 15,897, and then we're jumping those up a good amount to 16,501. We budget, correct me if I'm wrong in this, we budget based on what the budget was last year. You know, if a certain department had $500,000 on budget last year, they're allowed 1% over that as a match, right? Even if they only spent $400,000 on that, all right? So the problem that I have sometimes, I've always had with our budget numbers is that they're consistently based on that type of thing. They're not based on the actual spend. You know, what I've always wanted, and I've always felt it would be better for us is that if we looked at the actual spend and said, you know, you spent $400,000 in this department last year, you know, you can have 1% based on that. Now, I know what happens. I've been in these budget situations before. At the end of the year, all of a sudden that person has that 400,000, they find somebody to spend $100,000. Okay, I understand that, but at the same time, there's obviously. But it gives us more numbers, though. It gives us something comparable that we're actually doing, though, to compete against or compare against. Where right now it's just every year we budget this high number. Oh, you know what? We didn't do it, and yeah, it looks great to people out there when we talk about it that we actually save money. It looks like, but it's not based on the real numbers.
Well, I'll say one exception to that is, sometimes what goes included in the budget is like one-time add-ons that a department requests. So those are not like automatically renewed, and that dollar amount's not automatically renewed and given to the department. They would have to ask for that amount every year. I would also say many of the departments don't actually incur that much favorability, anything on their salary lines. You know, that's really the biggest driver of where you get a lot of that favorability that the organization experience. That's their open positions and, you know, people getting hired in at some other rate than what was the person before them was making or something. So a little bit uncontrollable by the department manager per se, but there certainly could be some, you know, savings doing it in that way, like you said, that might result in some.
Can I just interject a little bit here? We do not automatically add that 1%, nor do we, you know, our administrative team sits down and looks at all the numbers. And would we approve moving, you know, increasing those budget lines? If they're not spending their budget line completely, we're not gonna have them bump up another 1%. In fact, I don't know how many of the lines actually moved up 1%, but it's not a significant portion.
Just looking at the budget summary, I think we're like pretty much flat actually in the other operating.
I think the biggest areas where we're seeing that increase is the personnel and benefits line. And we've done, you know, we've done a lot, I think,
Right.
especially this year and the past couple of years to bring that down as much as possible by reducing hours in the library, reducing positions that are not necessary,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
The other
Not
thing-
that they're not necessary.
Since we were talking about that row, that line M, the other thing I would point out in lines L and M, is that, again, like trustee Vic said, you know, in the budget, we don't adjust for what we think we're not going to, but the long range fiscal plan we do. We try to get it a little bit more realistic. So you see in that row L, it's 0 for all those years where we kind of have real information. But then starting next year, we do sort of subtract that. We think we're not going to incur this much. You know, we really think we're going to come in a little under right there. But what I would point out about that number is we use that based on history. And in the past, we were not incurring up to like 5% of expenditures, you know, was a pretty big number that that would cause us to be really favorable at the end of the year. That trend is changing. It's now only on like a couple year average, it's only been at 1.3% unincurred. So, you know, one of the reasons all of us have been like, oh, well, you know, we always come in like maybe $1 million favorable, you know, like, that was true for a long time, you know, because we were on average seeing about a 5% unincurred rate. Now it's really less than 2% unincurred rate. Just sort of seeing those expectations going forward without being able to see the future, which I really wish we could do to make the process a lot easier.
Mike, can you remind us, or Sarah, what is the village doing this year?
It's 2.4%.
2.4.
2.46, actually, yeah.
4.6, okay. Does anyone else have thoughts? I wrote some things down. Just, like, for historical reference for, or whatever, more information. The Park District is levying 4.99. We found out at our meeting this week, I didn't realize this, they levy the max every year. They do have a lot of land and a lot of physical property to upkeep.
Well, does the village have, excuse me for interrupting, but when you said the max, the village, see, I'm used to operating under a tax cap. Is Arlington Heights under a tax cap?
Yeah, I think we're still capped at 5%.
Yeah,
Is that,
I think it's Cook County or state of Illinois.
state of Illinois, it's not, because some communities I know is self-imposed. And, so yeah, then the part, see, 4.99, why they do that is they don't want to have a public
Right,
notice.
right,
The black border notice, which we
Right.
do every year.
yeah, so.
And, so,
Yeah, I just want, so they're doing 4.99, the village is. Sounds like doing 2.46, Wheeling Township is doing 0%, well, they haven't confirmed that, that's what they're talking about. First of all, thank you so much this is a lot of work for your whole department and all of the department heads and everyone, so it's awesome. I was super impressed by how the healthcare costs came down, which is amazing, and, that was really good savings, especially because the first estimate was 14.9% increase. And we're at 7%, so that's great. Also lowering full-time employees, like to be more accurate or is super helpful. So I think all of those things, they're making our budget more accurate, like going forward. One of the things that I think is tricky and might be tricky in this year's budget is that interest rates are different, right? The Fed lowered it 0.5 percentage point, doesn't sound like, but they could lower it another quarter next year. And I know that particularly last year, we incurred a lot of, we benefited from that a lot. So I'm sure that was hard to budget.
Yeah.
How did you even do that?
Yeah, I confirmed that process with the village because it always feels like it's always looking backwards in it. It's how they budget too, because we had such a low budget at one point and then interest rates went up and we're getting all this revenue. We're like, this is correct, this is good, and I said, yeah, and so I'm like, you guys budget to just look at past trends, and they do, which is what we do. But then anytime it changes, you'll have that lag while you catch up to the trend for the
Yeah.
next budget. So
Right.
that's, we just look at history, yeah.
It's a tricky one. Carol or Greg, do you know when, I didn't realize that it used to be one big pot of money budget. Do you know when that changed? I mean, it's not,
I know, maybe before I got on the board, I don't.
Who's better on the board?
it's not on the website, so it'll be before like 2000s, I don't know what's the first year on there, so a while ago, yeah, I didn't realize that, that's interesting. I guess my inclination from this, we know that salaries and staff is the majority of our budget, what is it, 75%?
73,
Yeah,
73.
And we want to keep our wonderful staff, so we know that our budget is going up. Since I've been on the board, we've been, like Greg said, we've been under budget at the end of the year, every year. And I know that we've only done a 1% tax levy in, once in the past 14 years.
14 years. I think.
Yeah.
No,
There's
it was,
One.
I was on the board, I've only been on the board, what? 6.
I'm gonna say it was like
9 years.
2017, 2018.
It was about, 17, 18,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it
It was
was-
before I was on the board.
It was like
It's
one-
been 0 since I've been on the board.
It was like 1.5%.
Yeah,
So
so-
that was-
Just 1%.
7, 8 years. So
$142,000.
I can see, I mean, we have good stories to tell. You are obviously good stewards of our community's money. I guess my inclination, and I want to hear what everyone has to say. I would like to have 1 year where we actually don't make the budget, because I feel like in looking out through this, we always are much better than we think. And 1 year, I know we had more than the 75% that, you know, was our target, between 33% and 75. We're not even at the midpoint of that, which would be 54%. To me, if we could spread out perhaps some of the lighting over 2 years and get that capital down a little bit, we know we're gonna have to do it. And I think I would like to do it next year and do the full 3%, because I think, you know, 0.5%, 1% is, let's just do it when we do it. But, you know, the village is doing an increase, the park district doesn't increase. I don't know, I'm not sure we need it yet. That's my thought, but I'm interested in everyone's thought.
One thing I think that needs to be taken into consideration, and that is the new growth. And there is gonna be new growth at the southern end of our village. And, you know, you only get what you levy. And, see, we're so used to in a district that we levy for the CPI, and because we have the potential for a lot, for new growth. So we always levy high, and then the county cuts us,
Mhm,
you know, to where we can go.
mhm.
So, because we don't want to leave money on the table, mainly because of that new growth. So I think that that's something that, you know, we're going with the same levy, but yet we're
But
gonna
are
have
those
more
buildings
people
gonna be
utilize.
done? Are
Pardon?
those buildings gonna be done this year?
Well, they're gonna be done sometime, and anytime you don't increase your levy, you're leaving money on the table, because the next year, that's when you start it, and then you build from that. You can't ever go back.
Right, yeah, Sarah.
So, thank you for preparing all of this, and, so just a thought when we're talking about our capital funds and these projects that we plan for. But I appreciate, excuse me, Mike's point about, you know, really not wanting to play catch up. And I think too, with, you know, things are seemingly, you know, we've got inflation, we've got personnel costs. And, the other thing is we receive a lot of some of these projects, we receive funding through, our fundraising different arms, right? So again, when we see in one, you know, area, it's money's tight, we need more to cover costs. People also that are donating are also going to experience maybe some tighter budgets as well. So we might not see, you know, donations increasing. So just to be mindful that we are accepting, we're taking in a lot of support from both the foundation and the Friends, and that has really put a favorable kind of spin on our budget. So without those, we would be incurring those costs through the library. So that, just to keep in mind, that we've been really fortunate there. And so I think that my concern, I mean, I see right now, I think we could go another year with 0%. My concern is that catch up. I don't feel comfortable whenever I have to catch up to something and just being funded, not knowing certain things feel a little more volatile. And especially when we have such responsibility to such a large community. So that's just kind of, I just want to keep in mind that we do receive those funds as well.
I'm gonna bounce off what Sarah said. You know, we do depend a lot on the foundation and the Friends to support us, and those monies aren't guaranteed. You know, we've got a great job. I'm not saying on anything that they're doing, but, you know, the economy goes sideways and, you know, people aren't, you know, gonna be able to be as generous. So that's one thing to consider. The other thing that I'm remembering, and, you know, Greg and Carol can correct me if I'm wrong, but when we went to, removing the late fines and went only to replacement costs, there was a huge revenue line that was taken out of the budget. And I remember being in the Hendrickson room and having the big spreadsheet on the wall and like seeing as it played out, how we're gonna end up in a deficit. And, you know, we weren't gonna be there until, you know, 26, 27, 25. I don't remember, but it was down the road. And so my concern is, you know, if we look back, you know, is that part of what we're looking at as a source of funding that we no longer have, and therefore it is, you know, it's playing out, right? So like, it is getting shorter and shorter because we no longer have that revenue.
But that line item hasn't gone down, has it?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
removed.
It was removed, so it used to average about 137,000 of revenue from late fees. We do still charge customers if they lost
Right.
something.
So
but
that
as
part
far as
didn't
late
change,
fee,
but the
that
one
was
thirty-seven, yeah, away.
per year, yeah.
So. I think down the road, yeah, you know. We wanna make sure, obviously, we're keeping up the quality of what we're doing here and to make sure that we're doing things that. Arlington Heights deserves, people of Arlington Heights deserve, and the staff deserves too. They deserve to be in a good place that's up to date and clean and all that kind of stuff. So there's all that. But at the same time, obviously, we have to watch, you know, where we're going. You know, you talk about the foundation and, the Friends. One thing maybe just to think about is maybe, and I know the foundation especially has been great. About when we give them certain projects and we say, hey, let's go after this and let's fund this a little. But do we want to use that even more? You know, instead of some of these capital projects, instead of just increasing the tax levy, going out and trying to use that a little bit more strategically, even so than we've done before. At least have the conversation with the foundation to see what they're gonna do.
I'm not for a foundation funding operational things. Funding the kitchen, great. That was a real plus, you know, that's not a real core service for the library. But, and have that, so those are the kind of things I think a foundation should not renovation of bathrooms, not lighting. We did our LED lighting, I think, over 3 years. 4 or 3 years, you know, and we finished, it was probably, I don't know, 50, 60,000 a year. The difference was we have realized great savings because we pay electricity. This library does not. So, you know, it behooved us but we did it over, because it was an expensive project. So I can see, you know, doing that over a couple of years, because you're not really saving any money, but it's just something that's good to do. But I really feel that it's, not that they would fund superfluous things, but, I just think, you know, chillers and HVAC systems and that kind of stuff, I think it should come out of the
It's harder.
operating budget. Oh, yeah, you can't raise money, yeah. You know,
But you.
like the Everbright wall, great, that's a great foundation thing, you know, yeah, so, because it does add, but it's not, you know, it's a frosting on the cake, you know.
But the foundation is going to be there to do certain things like this, and you decide what's gonna make more sense, you know, operational or the more expensive capital things, you know, to where you're getting to, you know, maybe you look at something like the bookmobile and you sit back and go, okay,
Well, yeah,
that's something that the foundation could do, and now that money doesn't have to come out of.
They're doing that.
Well, even more so. I'm just saying more so. I'm saying lean on them, so than what we're doing right now. You know, doing things like that, you know, to see.
no, yeah, I can see the
more out of that.
bookmobile, definitely.
Go ahead.
Can I,
Yeah.
we have asked the foundation for $250,000 towards bookmobile and have talked about asking the Friends for 100,000, plus we have some donation money that might help pay
Yeah.
for the
Most
entire bookmobile. So we are doing that, but at the same time, the foundation, this is their focus. I mean, they're only funding smaller things until they can fund that, because that is a big ask at $250,000.
Oh,
And it's gonna, you know, I think they're a little relieved that it's gonna take us 2 years to get the bus, because they can't just pull that money out of thin air, you know, so they're planning to try to raise that money. So, I mean, and the Friends are wonderful and, you know, they just funded our Hendrickson Room AV this past year, which was actually over $100,000. One of the things that they're starting to do is go after grants. So they found a grant that can help reimburse for a good portion of that. We are also looking at a grant for the Mobile. In fact, I have a meeting with Mary Beth Canty tomorrow morning to talk to her about it and see if there's some, you know, state of Illinois money that might be able to help us out as well. So we are definitely, you know, leveraging all of our other avenues for income.
I was also wondering if there might be grants for the lighting,
Yeah, oh
you
yeah,
know,
there are.
for, you know,
There is some,
Yeah,
yeah, you
we
can
got-
get some of that offset, yeah.
I mean, I want to reiterate our support for the staff and like, we definitely need to make sure that we're keeping our fabulous staff and the programming. I guess in my thinking, I'm just wondering if we can even out the capital budget a little bit, because it's really a big jump next year from, and I mean, it's really the lighting. But, I mean, the rest of the budget, I think we've done a really good job. I just thinking about, you know, if the economy changes or whatever. Which actually, I think it's going the other direction, but at any rate, it would affect people perhaps donating to our two funding arms, but it would also affect our taxpayers, so. I mean, I guess you could look at that both ways, like, do we want to be? I don't know, just in the way that I'm thinking, let's show our taxpayers a year that with all of our incredible efforts, the grants, the trust that we've benefited from, that we didn't quite make it, and then we levy. But otherwise, we already have 58% of our, you know, the percentage of our ending fund balance is 58% of our operating expenditures. I don't know, between, you know, I know we're supposed to be between 33 and 75, but we're still at the high end.
And I would just say, my preference in being a Cook County library is to be at the very high end of that. I mean, because the tax bills have been delayed a couple of times, even just since I've been here. And, you know, when you have to start looking at other, you know, funding, opportunities, you know, temporarily to pay your operational costs, you know, that's would be a lot of work, that I would like to avoid.
Yeah.
You know, spending staff time to do that sort of thing. But, so I do think keeping on the highest end of that policy range is preferable.
And this budget includes the 0% includes an $825,000 transfer from the general fund to capital.
That was this year in
So-
2024, yes, because we ended the previous year above 75%. But we also had not funded the capital fund in many years, so that had remained stagnant. So it kind of served two purposes. One, to get our operating fund back within that 75% policy, but also to build up the capital fund, which was overdue for a boost.
Right.
Yeah. and just
Yeah.
One more, and then I'd like to hear if
Yeah.
everybody else, but I mean, sorry. So, you know, I hear President Murray, you're kind of aiming for like more 0%, which is fine too. I'm thinking I would go more 2.5%. So again, I'd like to hear from other people. The other thought is I do, like I said, I don't like scrambling. I don't, as an individual, I don't like scrambling even more as a governmental agency that is responsive to a community, especially when resources get diverted to scrambling instead of being able to plan and prepare. And then it just seems like from that top, it all kind of trickles down. Would that happen? It may not. So I hear kind of the warning bells, and I know it's not dire, so I take that and just heed that warning. Again, it's not here yet, and I can see that we could do another year and, you know, then maybe move stuff around and probably be fine. But I do think that, you know, thinking about the tax, you know, what it comes to each, you know, person, that's definitely a consideration. When we talk about like whether people are going to be donating or not, I do think, you know, relying on Foundation and Friends, like the foundation does the scholarship, they've got their own things they want to focus on too. So I think that's great that we have them, and yes, let's keep utilizing. I feel like you all do that. You find you get creative. But just that we have to be responsible for our own entity and like what we're looking ahead. And then again, being more efficient, energy efficient, that saves money, you know, but that we have to be on top of that. So again, I'm not like, you know, super has to be, not 0%, but I would be comfortable more with the 2.5%.
Does the library get impact fees?
Yes.
Yeah.
New
New growth.
yeah, that's the
Cash in lieu.
cash in lieu of land.
It's, what's it called?
Cash in lieu of land is how the village
Okay.
terms it. It's not significant in terms of the amount of revenue it is, very small
Should be.
dollars.
You should get that sewed up before that Arlington Parkland is sold.
That's the TIF money, correct?
No,
Mm-mm.
no, this is with developers, when they pull permits,
Right.
this is when they pay the impact fee, so it's not any cost to the village. And, usually there's. He says it's not required law, you know, it's out of the goodness of the village, the city's heart, but, you know, to work out. And I know ours is based on number of bedrooms and that kind of thing and what it is, but,
So you're saying that a developer pays it when they build a house before the house is on the tax rolls?
right. And
Correct.
that's what it means, because it's impacting, you know, schools get it all, and of course, they get big bucks. But, you know,
But if the house
it
isn't
can be,
built,
it
why
can
do
be
schools
significant.
get money?
Pardon?
If the house isn't built and there's no students there, then why? do the
No,
schools
no,
get money?
but when, because the taxes are a year late. So they built the house and then the children are going to school and the district wants to have that money by the time that new resident is going to school. But, yeah, you should review that and see what it is, and if it doesn't, it's like just a few dollars, I'd get that taken care of before that Arlington property is sold.
I mean,
Well,
we can,
even worse so, the area down the south,
Yeah.
that's being, like, there's what, 4 buildings that are being built where the International Plaza had been or whatever, like, that's happening, so
Well, I think they've got a plan across the street. Do they have the plan yet for International Village?
I've lost track.
That's on the southeast corner. Pardon, the southeast corner, that area, but I don't know if they've done anything. But, you know, so those permits would have already been pulled and all that, but, yeah, you know, it's.
I wonder if
add
it's
up.
what, 5,000 to 10,000 a year, Tracy?
Oh,
Yeah,
that,
maybe even a little more than that.
no,
I think it's
I'd look at
Okay,
what it is
okay.
and have a meeting with Randy. No, the thing is, ours is so old, you know, we were trying to get an update from the city, you know, so they keep going, you know, because it's kind of like this gift, this money they give us. I mean, I could send you what we have, but, we've tried to get that updated so that, and they keep adding a certain percentage on, but it goes back to like 2004, and then they keep adding this percentage on. Can't we get one for now? You know, it starts now what it is. So.
Trustee Kelly, what do you have to
Oh,
say?
gosh, I'm actually absorbing it all. I was leaning along what Sarah had said. I do think it's great when it's always 0%, but I also, I'm a firm believer in you get what you pay for and you have to show your worth. And if you can make a case for why it is, I think people respect that and they understand it. And, you know, it's not always the perspective of like resting on your laurels of what 0% shows. And I think I've heard a solid case like it could be 2%, 2.5%.
Trustee.
And I'm curious, who pays for electricity? I didn't know that. Who pays for
ComEd doesn't, they're not
So
charged.
it's in that
It's
one
in the
program, so we
franchise
do
so
the
that they-
construction. Okay.
They can utilize the land, as these were covenants or whatever that were created many decades ago. And, so villages and municipalities don't have to pay for electricity, and you pay not much for gas either, don't you get some kind of something for gas?
We have an energy,
Yeah.
contract.
But how much like do we use off the
No.
grid for electric? Like when we change it all, that helps
Well, it helps-
alleviate, right?
oh,
It mitigates some of
it
the
helps,
grids.
yes.
I think that's a really
Right.
good thing to keep in mind too.
But, No, our electric bill, I think, what, 200,000 a year we spend? Yeah. So we've been able to, I think it used to be 250, so.
Trustee Burrell.
Yeah, I just keep thinking about, you know, inflation has been hard for a lot of people. And I'm thinking about what trustee Gala said that, it is harder to raise money when people have less to give. And so I think just also in general, as just in my personal life, I hear what you're saying. Trustee Mari, about wanting to kind of, so go into debt, to sort of show like, hey, we needed to do this, but it's just not what I'm comfortable with. And then I just keep thinking, if something were to, if the economy were to go south, that's when people need the library the most and use it the most. And so I'd hate to be in that position where we're really scrambling and, oh, we have so many people using it and, ooh. So, yeah, I think I would like to try to keep it as low as possible, but without, going into, a bad situation.
Yeah, but we wouldn't be going into debt, right? It's just having 1 year where our expenditures exceed our.
Yeah,
Tax,
okay.
right.
And it's possible it doesn't even happen. These are projections. We still
Yeah.
have a few months left of the year. We don't know for sure. These are
Yeah.
just pretty decent, much better guesses than we would have had at budget target time.
Yeah.
One other, since we're talking about the village a lot, but one other thing I would just mention with respect to that, their levy increase that they're pursuing, is that, we arrive at like our recommendations completely independently. They have their budget process. We've already run the process. At some point, we're like, hey, because they're gonna levy your tax, what do you guys want to do coming up with? It really helped pass the sanity check that it really is an economy issue that we're both facing when we kind of came out with such close number, we came to 0 to 3, they landed, on 2.46, right? You're just like, you feel a little bit better knowing that your separate methods are, seeing a lot of the same factors. And a lot of the libraries raise 3 to 5% every single year. And everyone's kind of living in that same economy. And to me, there's potentially some value, assuming you come up with it independently, there's potentially some value in terms of communication to the community. If you are at that point, when you are so close, staying in lockstep to when you raise it, something worth considering too, just in terms of communicating with our residents, the reason.
You know what can help? We did this one time. What the amount of the levy would be and what it breaks down for a household per person. And
I
I
said that.
at the time,
That was- Yeah,
I think it
one
was
meeting you said something, it was so much
500
smaller than I thought.
500,000.
Not, making it.
$500,000 increase is something like, I don't know, $10 or something per, so when you break it down, and that's if there's any concern from taxpayers to say, well,
You can't even.
it's, you always compare it to Starbucks,
Yeah, no.
Yeah. I actually printed out my tax bill because they do it different every time. They seem to do it a little different. I thought this one was helpful for a resident. So for my tax bill this year, and everyone's different. I don't know. I mean, it always goes up, but anyway. Compared to 2002, my 2003 tax bill showed, 30 cents more for the library fund, which is kind of interesting. Obviously, when you look at what you pay, and this is helpful for residents to see, the biggest part of our tax bill is District 25, then 214, then the village, then Harper, then the library, at least on my tax bill. I'm assuming everyone's is the same. I don't know. I just thought that's an interesting way to do it, and know if we could do that too. And that's really more of a communication issues, like, hey, we haven't increased the levy in 8 years or whatever the number is. And this year, for an average household, it went up $28. Please make sure you take out 2 extra books this year or something. I always try to encourage people
It
to,
won't
you
even
know,
be that much.
use the library as much as possible. I'm like, Wall Street Journal at the library, or, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I think that's a good communication, method. I can see both sides. I can see saying, hey, the village is increasing, Park District is increasing, we are holding firm 1 more year. I can also see the village is increasing 2.4, let's under them and do 2.
And another thing to remember, although they have more to deal with than the library, they also have other revenue. The Park District charges for everything. The village has tax on this, tax on that, tax on this, you know, so there is additional revenue where the library, now that we don't charge for fines, you know, where's the additional revenue? There isn't a whole lot of resources.
Get some terrific grants that our staff applies for. But that's a good point.
And I feel, I've got a couple of thoughts. One is that like, whether we do this or not, we're gonna continue to go after grants. We're gonna continue to work with the foundation and the Friends to try to get things covered. So, you know, assuming that that's like the baseline and that it continues, it is possible that, you know, kind of massaging things, that we could get to a place where we're okay. However, I would rather be proactive than reactive. And I don't think it has anything to do whether what the Park District is doing or the village is doing. It's what are we doing that's the best for the library, for our staff, for our patrons, for, you know, to bring in the amazing events and speakers and programming, you know, because what start noticing when things get a little rough around the edges, and I want to make sure that we're continuing and we have the foundation to continue doing the amazing job that we do, and that the staff has what they need, and that they're not pinching pennies or scrambling to try to figure out how to stretch something that just doesn't have any more elastic in it. You know, money makes money, so if we have extra, like, I'm not sure how that all works on the back end, but like invest it, you know, put it back into that investment fund so that if we do need it, we have it. And I mean, I realize that whether we decide to go for 0 or some other number, that may or may not, you know, none of us can predict the future, whether we'll actually be in the red or in the black by the end of it, but you know, being on that line, I'd rather know that we're really projecting for a positive thing. And I guess my other part of it is that, like, I get that nobody wants to hear that there's a levy increase, right? Like, yeah, sign me, take more money, like, no one wants that. However, you know, those who are gonna be upset and ruffled about it, they can, and we have the documentation to be like, okay, well, this is how much it actually is going to be for your family. We're not talking about hundreds of dollars or something like that. And I would rather that proactively say, you know, this is what we need to do to make sure we don't end up in a bad place, rather than be like, oh, snap, we should have done that, and now, you know, like, here's the proof in the pudding. I think I would rather go at it and be like, you know what, you're right, maybe we didn't need so much, but we can't predict the future. And
Yeah,
It's
you make
fiscal
that next-
responsibility.
and then you make the next decision next year, right? Like, next year may not have to be like, okay, well, we didn't actually end up needing it. It turned out more favorably, so maybe we don't have to continue the upward trend of increasing levy year after year, or maybe we can, you know, instead of it being 3, it's gonna be 1.5 for the next few years or something. That's just my take, so, I mean,
Yeah, I think it's a value proposition,
Yeah.
and I think Sasha would do a great job of spinning that message and communicating what the message is, and you know, you get what you pay for, and
Right, yeah.
and.
I also just always want to be mindful of there's a lot of older senior residents, people that are on fixed incomes in Arlington Heights, and so all the other line items go up, and I'd like to be as close to target as possible. That said, I think my mind has been changed tonight based on the discussion, so I would really prefer not to go above what the village is doing. What do you?
What's the
What
village
do
again?
people, 2.46?
I was gonna say, I just want to throw out one more thing when thinking about this, because I'm still having a problem with doing anything, especially knowing that with my original comment, where are we exactly with the capital expenditures and how can we smooth this out? But I was just looking through these numbers that we've got here. If we do a 3% this year, if we do a 0% this year, hold it off at 3%. If you look on the, line R here, the percentage, it only changes it by 2%. We're at 29. We're at 40% if we do a 3% this coming, for this coming budget year. If we don't do the 3% and then we do it the next year.
I'm
we're at
sorry,
30.
where are you?
Yeah, where are you?
Okay, you've got to take the one that's at the end of the first packet.
It's the 0%.
You're at our word?
Nope.
The
Okay, no, don't worry about the 0%.
Okay.
Look,
in the packet.
Yeah, I can
So-
show that's the one that we just got here.
so
tonight.
item one, there's an LRFP in that one.
What
Okay.
page is that?
It's toward the end.
It's right before the narrative.
Right from there, right.
Yeah.
And then the other one I'm referring is on item two. Just looking at the two of those. So,
So are you looking at the long range?
So what
plan?
line
yeah,
is
looking
it?
at the long range plan.
So the 0% forever, and then the one that
No,
is.
don't worry about the 0% forever.
Okay,
Don't worry about that one.
then the 3%, the 0% this year and then 3%.
Right. So if you look at this line R, we're at 40% of the ending fund balance in 29. If we do 3% this year, if we don't do if we do 0% this year, we're at six.
There's no.
I see.
Okay, he's looking at this,
Oh,
38% here and the 40%. Yeah, no, that and that at the
Got it.
2029.
One of the factors with that is the capital transfers. So to make that work with the heading it off at the 0%, we did fewer capital transfers. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so in the other scenarios, that's why there's kind of a few different bars in highlighted blue. We have to keep the capital fund in the black, right? So depending on what we have planned in those out years, that number changes as well a little bit.
Right.
That's why those are highlighted. So we don't just change the levy, but then we also have to make sure that we are funding the capital projects that we have. I would say the further out you get, the less accurate that is. We have no idea what capital projects might pop up, but
So can you see, Greg, in row N, in the scenario where we have 0% this year and 3% next year? The blue highlighted, we're not transferring as much in the one,
Yep.
Yeah.
Which, okay, so that does change my thoughts a little bit. It's kind of a little bit leaning is what I was thinking, because we felt that we had to do that in order to get this to work, right? That we had to not transfer as much money. So that's kind of showing right there that especially with the capital fund, that's the one that's trickier for us on what we're doing and how we're doing that, because we have to play that game with that. I gotta be honest, that gets me even more uncomfortable with what's going on with the capital fund.
Yeah, when you say what's going on, what do you mean by like what's
The
going on?
expense, just what we're putting into all the expenses. And look, I know this is coming off sounding like I wanna, shortchange the library or shortchange what's going on, but I'm also thinking about just, this 0% levy thing has been something that we as a library have done a fantastic job on for so long. And that's the things that we are great about, that we have really been good stewards of the money, and really, and the staff have done a fantastic job So I don't take this lightly, finally taking the step and going for an increase. And that's why when I look at the expenses, I try to, and we're breaking away from that precedent, and for me, that's a big precedent. Are we doing it for the right reasons? Have we thought through everything? Have we thought through every scenario, saying this is how we can pull back to not do this and put this and move this down the line? And gotta keep saying that, I don't like the way it sounds. Can we stall it a little bit to where we actually have to do that to people? You talked about the economy, and people are, yes, the inflation has gone up and money has gone up, and so now we're asking for a little bit more, but we're trying to hide behind what the village and the park district is doing also. I don't know if that plays out real comfortably either.
Well,
Yeah, I don't like that
Okay.
comparison.
What we're doing.
we're not hiding behind that. We have kept a 0% levy when they have raised taxes. So I don't know that we always have to go lockstep. My question was just whether or not we could, push back some of the lighting. But I also don't recognize that as an organization, what company has a flat budget for 8-9 years in a row? No, and with, increased inflation, with increased personnel costs and healthcare costs and retirement benefits, all of that. So I don't know, but so again, I came in here thinking I'm comfortable 0%, and now I'm thinking that maybe we should do a couple percent. I don't know.
And
Go ahead.
President's my point about, an organization, like just as much as I would raise a red flag if someone is saying we're doing this, we're increasing every year, I would also question, why is it 0? What is being compromised? Something has to give at some point, because again, I recognize you talk a lot about the staff, you want to support the staff, and I respect that, and I'm right there with you on that. And the library, the great things our library does. Yes, well, there's a reason. And I think that part of our job, for, kind of oversight is that, yeah, we have that checks and balance, but honestly, the administrative teams and the staff, they have every time it comes back and it's like, oh, this is how we navigated this. This is how we've done that. And I think the judgment calls have been on par. And I think that relationship works really well. It's like a give and a take of all right, you're saying this, well, let's talk. And I think to go into the weeds, so to speak, on okay, let's go back again for the capital budget, the capital projects, with all due respect, I would say that's been done. And that has been reviewed, and and this is at the point when we have our staff coming saying not our staff, as colleagues here and saying, okay, we've done our best. This is what we're presenting. This is what we're saying. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I get you want to be really, just responsible and being hey, are we sure we want to do this? I don't want to do something in rash. And I would not use the terms, any verb of hiding. I mean, I think it's responsible. Look at what your neighboring agencies are doing, and to say, okay, so we're with, we're understanding, we want to know the analysis, we want to understand the reasoning, because, as Tracy said, it's kind of a comfort. We do our own analysis, and now we're seeing, oh, you know what, they came up with the same thing, so we're in line. So I'll stop talking. I think that, I get where I think I understand where you're coming from, and just really being responsible. It's just, we gotta also kind of, I feel like we've done some due diligence, so there you go.
Yes, Carol.
I know this probably has nothing to do with anything, but I don't know of one library that it does not increase their levy. Right, Mike?
I think Skokie's been,
Have they been flat?
for a couple of years.
Couple years, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
but,
I think, it would be great to keep it at 0, and as a person, I would love to do that, but I again, while, you know, in any business, you're going to see what the industry is doing, and you are gonna look at your neighbors and whatnot to figure out, are you in line, are you seeing something completely like an outlier, right? But, and so like, in my mind, we are doing that with other libraries, we're doing that with other, you know, our village and with our park districts who are under the same tax thing. I don't think, as far as I'm concerned, I have never voted on a levy going up or down based on what the park district or the village was doing. It was what the library needed. So I really don't like this idea that we're somehow, you know, riding their coattails or hiding behind them or any of that. I think that we are making a decision for the library. And I really don't care what they do. We
Yeah,
need
you have to
do what's
compare
right for
apples
us.
to apples, like what
Exactly.
the library.
So I mean, knowing what they're doing is important, I think that's valuable information, but I don't think that that really changes how I will personally vote on what we should do here. I would love to leave it 0%. I would love to, because it just feels good and it sounds good and I can be super proud of that. And we should be proud of that. We have done that for so long. And I do agree that maybe we can look at having these capital projects, i.e. the lighting specifically, see if there are some additional grants and see if we can maybe spread this out. Like, you know, Carol had suggested that she did with her library. I think those are all positive things. And then to your point, Sarah, like, these are things that they do anyway. And so, you know, like I had said earlier, like, we're gonna have the foundation, we're gonna have the friends, and we're gonna have the staff who are looking at those things and actively pursuing different options and the best ways to accomplish the things that we need done. And hopefully all of those things stacked up. I don't, you know, when you're in a budget or anything that you're trying to do, there's all of different little pieces that come together. And so I think we need to be careful and let the staff do what the staff does and trust that they're making the right decisions. And that's part of what Mike oversees, is to make sure that each department is bringing in things under budget and on time. And, you know, the managers are doing that. And
Yeah, yes, Carol. I would rather do 3% levy now, maybe a 2% next year, than 0.05%. People will not remember, they won't remember that, well, they had a 0% levy all those years. All they'll remember is 5% in 1 year.
right.
Much rather go incremental.
Yeah.
And that's what I like the 2%. It has
Yeah.
nothing to do with the park district or the village. I just think, I believe in like gradual implementation, you know, just for like the sticker shock, even if it's a small amount in terms of one person's property tax. Like 0 to 3 is just like, you know, it's like 0 to 60 in a car to me, you know, it's just.
2% about 300,000 then?
Yeah, about that.
Is that enough of it? Like, out of curiosity, and I'm not looking at all these numbers and I keep looking to the wrong page on my computer. It's making. But if we did do, what percentage do we need to break even?
Oh, we would need 4%.
Right?
Yeah,
we're not
we'd
even-
still be budgeting a 300,000 deficit, even with the 3% increase. Yeah. No, I do think in actual favorability will probably make that up, you know,
And you said
I
that
think
we
we did
always
this year.
budget from 200 to 900,000 as a deficit.
decade, as
Okay.
far back as I've looked, there's
Let's-
always been a budgeted deficit
Okay.
between 200 and 900,000. If we went with 2%, that would give the library 300, almost 300,000 extra per year to work with, just a little bit of breathing room. And I think the other thing that hasn't been mentioned that's worth noting is just on their strategic plan, when you look at all the cool things that we have asked our staff to look into doing over the next few years. I mean, all those things take money, honestly, not just their time and the money that's in this form of their work and their efforts. Of course, we're gonna pay them regardless of what exact type of work they're doing. But some of the things require financial resources just to make those things happen too. So just to give them a little bit of breathing room to accomplish some of those things in that great strategic plan, I think would go a long way, especially in the for services department. But 2% would be 300 extra, 300,000 extra, and our budgeted deficit would be 456,000.
Yes. We used to budget this way, deficit, because we'll make it up because we don't spend all of our budget. When we went to budget based on revenue, our director of finance could then sleep well at night. It always made her very nervous.
Yeah, I would just add that, like, you know, fiscal responsibility absolutely means don't overspend, don't, you know, manage your expenses. But to me, it also means have sufficient reserve in case something happens, you know, prepare yourself. So, you know, don't stock it all away. You let taxpayers see the fruits of, you know, their tax dollars too. But, it means both of those things to me.
What is our? What is our, let's see, taxes are collected in what, August and March, right?
Well, this year they
In theory.
were collected early, right?
July was it, well, anyway,
Yeah.
so at the end of the fiscal year, before taxes come in, what is our fund balance? What is that balance in, you know, that's
In the lowest spot.
in the lowest spot of the year, yeah.
You got that.
In the cash flow we're talking about?
Yeah, well, just, you know, how much is not reserves, I call it the fund balance before you get the.
The second.
The second, you know, and so maybe the lowest part is February, is it February? I don't know, but I'd be interested in that, yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
this year they
and
caught up
They
because they
changed
did.
it last year and this
Pretty
year.
quickly.
I would say maybe it's around 8 million if I have to.
About 8 million, so what is that?
And usually it's
About
between
50.
10 to 12.
So that is 50, so that's about 6 months,
Right,
about 6 months, yeah,
right.
that's.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go higher than that.
Mhm.
I'm a believer of these libraries that say they have a year in fund balance, they're asking for trouble from their taxpayers. Because their taxpayers will say, why are you levying when you've got a year?
Right.
I always think 3 to 6 months is good,
Right.
not more than 3, not more than 6. So if we're there, then, you know, having an increase in levy is not out of the question.
Well, the thing is that we're not there because we're at 70-some percent or 68% is where we're gonna be. So that's
That's looking at total revenue for the year, though. What Kara was talking about is where.
The low point.
Because we.
Yeah.
It's your reserves policy, what you have for your operational budget, right? And you're saying a 3 to 6 month.
Three to 6 months of funds, so if you spent everything, what would you have left in that balance? Your rainy day fund in a way, you know? So 3 to 6 months, I think is very fiscally responsible, yeah.
That's the same that they tell you to do for your home, right? You
Right.
lose your job, you need 3 to
Yeah.
6 months worth of money in the bank to pay for your rent or your apartment or whatever. You know, so that's,
Yeah.
Right,
it's easy for people. Yeah, like that means, you know,
Yeah.
to me, that's the same.
All right, well, I don't think we're gonna come to an agreement today. I think I'm hearing a couple things. One, perhaps, well, our meeting's next Tuesday, so this is a. Sunday.
yeah,
Yeah.
week from tomorrow.
And I wonder if there's see a little bit of variation on the lighting, maybe.
Yeah.
over the years.
We
I
can
don't
go
know
back
if
and
that's
look at
possible.
that, so.
And then the other thing is. I mean, I don't know that we're gonna have a unanimous, I mean, we don't have to have a unanimous vote for
Now we have to have a majority, right?
what? We would need them, I'm just here, listening to the conversation at the table. I hear you and I came in with a 0% levy in my mind. For a lot of reasons, and I've listened to this discussion and I've changed my mind. But I don't think you'll change your mind, but it sounds like the majority of the people in this room would be willing to do a levy. And I, you know, I don't think we always have to have a unanimous vote, because it doesn't sound like we're gonna have a unanimous vote. Right. But we haven't for a couple other issues that have come.
Is it worth discussing if there were to be a levy, what does that look like? Because I think some
Levy.
people,
$300,000.
Well, that's a 2%, yeah.
so like, it's, I think some people are on like that 3 and some people are at 2.5 and some people are
Yeah,
at
2,
2. So like,
it's
I don't know,
yeah.
can you, yes
You
versus
agree?
no isn't quite.
3 is what's in your packet.
Oh, here's what's in our packet.
Yeah.
But a 4 point something is what you said would need to have
Yeah,
a
Well,
Guessing, something higher than that.
That's probably hard to.
Yeah, no.
I don't know
that's
that
why I
we would
don't-
be.
No.
Exactly, yeah, I'm not saying, but three isn't the zero.
But I would love your direction on what you'd like me to include in the version that I'll bring at the next meeting, because that is the one I'll bring for, potential approval. And I know the villages, since they do levy our taxes, they're anxiously awaiting, similar direction, and I can give them final direction after,
And
our-
Sarah's presenting it the November, yeah, the
Yeah.
November
So
village board meeting.
you really need us to vote on it next time.
Correct.
Yes,
Okay, so here.
Which is next week.
yeah.
Which is next week.
It's Tuesday, yeah.
Here's what here's what I'm gonna say about my personal vote, and I kind of said this right at the beginning, and I think this is kind of a simple thing. Hopefully I haven't complicated, which I have. You came in with 3%, okay? I would suggest coming back with a 3% levy or proposal for us, and here's the reason why. First of all, you came with that number because you felt it was a comfortable number for where we need to be, and I totally respect, where that's coming from. Let's do that. Let's not go to 2%, stay a little bit underneath the village and all that kind of stuff. Let's just go to what Andy was saying. If we feel that 3% is the right thing to do. Now,
I'm gonna vote for 3%. So, I mean, then two people aren't gonna vote for it. I will. Yeah, I mean,
I don't know that I was championing 3%. I was trying to find out what the number was that we needed and what those
I
percentages.
don't wanna get too far, I hear what you're saying, but
Coming under, 400,000 under it. I don't like that. That is me.
for 10 years, we always come under budget though. So this year, at the end of the year, I predict we will be under budget.
But maybe it's not 400,000, maybe it's 200,000, now you're eating away, we're eating away.
Something that I always refer back to with my work is fiduciary responsibility. And even I don't take it lightly if we do a levy. I mean, personally, I would like it zero all the time too. But as I tell my board members at work that, some people are very risk averse and some people want to be super risky with things. You get in trouble if you go if we don't manage our fiduciary liability and we're not risky enough, we're too conservative, we are still liable and we can get in trouble legally because of that. So I am a firm believer in centrist, moderate, not too risk, not because of my fiduciary liability. And that is what's making me say we need a 2% or something.
Sarah, what do you think about a 2% versus a 3%?
I really hadn't, I was fine between 2 and 3. So
Jen,
that's,
what are you thinking?
Yeah, same, for me, 2 to 3 is a little bit tomato at this point,
It's really kind of, are we gonna levy or are we not gonna levy?
yeah, that's good.
Right.
yeah.
And you prefer 3? You prefer 0?
I actually didn't finish what I was saying, what I was saying before. I would say that if that's the number that Tracy came up with, and it's the one she presented, is the one she feels the most comfortable with, okay? So I would say 3%. Now, what's gonna get me on board, and I kind of said this at right at the beginning, and so to what you had said before, I'm gonna slightly disagree with something you said, that when we looked at the capital, we've looked at the capital funds before, okay, and we have gone through it. The problem is we haven't looked at it in this light. We looked at it as kind of like an open checkbook at that particular point, that this is what we really want to do. So that's why I'm asking with this new information for us to look at it. If we come back next week we've looked at some of these things and we've realistically looked at some of these capital projects, and we sit back and we say, hey, look, we've looked it through all these. This one, to your suggestion, we can span it out instead of 1 year, we span it out over 2 years. And we at least show that we've given some thought to how we can do this and to lessen the burden. That's really what I'm trying to get at. If we have to do a 2% or a 3% increase on it, and yes, I would probably, the more I'm thinking about it, I would go with 3%. Because I don't think there is a big difference between 2 and 3, and let's go with the number that Tracy, has presented. Come back next week and just say, look, this is where we're at, and this is what we think we can do, and we've given it. I can get on board with it. I'm not saying no just because out of spite, because I want to say 0. I'm just doing this because I want to make sure that we have looked through that and we've gone through that whole thought process. So I've just told you what you need to get me on board for next week.
My only other comment is that this is the third time you presented this to us, or third or fourth? So the capital stuff has been in every time.
I would just add too, because the way I come up with the 3% is not to break even, it is still to end up in a deficit. It's that inherently means it's not a perfect science, right? It's not just like the straight up calculation, this is exactly what we need. So if we did something that's more in the 2%, I would still be fairly happy. It would just might dictate, the future years, maybe, like I said, we're probably, as shown on these long-range fiscal plans, entering a period of a few small years of incremental increases rather than one large jump. Since that's what Mike and I feel is best, for the community, and for being flexible and adjusting year by year as we see what's actually happening. We can still do that with 2%, maybe that just means one more year, 1%, down the road,
Right.
So my point is, it's not just like I came up with 3% because that's our break even point. It's not
What? No, I'm sorry, what is that deficit with 3%?
with 3% is what's in your packet, and that is a 308,000.
308,000 deficit.
Yes, and what would it be with 2%? The deficit would be 456,000. And for comparison, our deficit this year budgeted was 872,000, and we're gonna almost make it up, just maybe not quite, so.
And that's half of the deficit at 2%.
Well, and just one other thing, remember that when people get their tax bills, if we levy 2%, it really goes up 4% because of the 2% Cook County that is added on to everybody. So just keep that in mind as we're thinking 3% is really 5%, and yes, that the reason we have that is because of people that contest their taxes or people that don't pay their taxes. But for all of us and most of our residents who pay the dollar amount, even at 0% levy goes up 2%, which is why, part of why we've been able to do so well.
I just wanted to clarify a couple things, just in relation to the deficit that you're talking about, that's deficit to budget, right? Not
Yeah.
deficit to revenue.
Right, yeah.
So this year, we're tipping over the scales of our expenses are exceeding revenue. And therefore, that's what has us a little worried. And
Yeah.
with financial and with budgeting, you don't want to make big swings. You want to have a gradual change and try to preempt as much as you can. I also want to clarify that we've never done capital projects with an open checkbook. We always look at stuff. We're always critical, and we have been very, very responsible with the projects that we've done and where we're at right now. So I just want to clarify that.
I know, and that's me opening my mouth again, but, all I was just trying to get is that we weren't, at all those times we've looked at it before, this is the first time that it's been brought to us that we were gonna, put in a 3% tax levy, or a 3% levy, this is the first time. So last time we talked about it, when we were talking about the goal, we were talking about a 0%, at that particular point. So this is brand new to this particular meeting.
That's true.
So that's just what I'm trying to get at. We were looking at it with a different scenario in the past when we were looking at it. Now we're looking at one where we're asking taxpayers to do a little bit more for what we've been talking about before. So that's the only reason why I'm saying, let's just kind of like take one more look at it, say, hey, we can take this, we can maybe move this out a little bit. I would say, if you come back next week and you tell me that Greg, I've taken a look at all of it, we can't move it, we absolutely have to do that. I will respect that, and that will go a long way towards where I'm at.
And I would say, take a look at it and see, if you are recommending 2, 2.5, 3. It sounds like we are all willing to, we think it's a good thing to vote for a tax levy. And maybe 3 is absolutely what you, are recommending. But I would encourage you to maybe look at 2 or 2.5 too. We'll see. All right, anyone else? All right, good discussion. Couple other things. Mike, can you tell us, how the roof, thank you, Tracy, how the roof, project?
Yes, it is, it's going, so we've been working with the village, the engineer, and the manufacturer to build the structure that was supposed to be placed on the roof a couple of weeks ago. Village asked if we could lower the beam that goes across to, you know, as close to the roof as possible, and we did drop it considerably. But then as they were prepared to bring it out, they did some final measurements and said, that's not gonna work. We're gonna run into some water pipes that go up to the chiller. And so they had to go back and re-engineer it to bring it back up to almost the same place of where we had it. So they're working, and there's a lead time with all of these changes because the engineer has to work with the manufacturer makes the changes, sends the steel off for galvanizing after it's manufactured and stuff. And then, you know, of course, we have to have the village approve everything. So it is, I believe right now it's back at the village. I think it's gonna pass through there pretty quickly, being that there's really not much else we can do. They did ask if we painted a certain color with it sticking up, which we have no problem with. So it is in process. There's just been a few, well, 2 or 3 changes in the height of it that we've had to correct. So it's moving just not quite as swiftly as we hoped.
But how about, can you give us an update on the filter?
Yes, one more thing with the chillers. So I want to let you guys know, as we talked a while back, when the HVAC company was bringing in the chiller, one of our chillers, it had tipped over, and they said they were going to replace it for us. We have now received that new one. So we were estimating an 8 to 12 month lead time. I think we got it in 4 or 5. So that's fantastic. It is downstairs, ready to be installed. So
Upright.
it is upright.
In bubble wrap.
Yeah, yeah.
Anybody near it for donut.
So that'll be installed once the, you know, the temperature cools down a little bit more. And then we'll expect to see the crane, for both that and, or not for that, but the cooling towers and the metal structure, here, you know, coming up in the fall. So, and then filtering, yes, we've implemented the filtering. We have not received much feedback at all. We implemented it and it's just gone well.
Yeah.
So we've talked ad nauseum, with our staff.
Call today.
Okay.
Someone might be for, next week for public comment. It's not happening with the filtering, but that was really our only one.
Good.
But overall,
Either way, that was the only
Yeah.
feedback you got. Okay.
Didn't you have a statistic about right before, when you were doing some of the research, what percentage of online traffic?
There were, yes, we implemented, we didn't turn on the filter yet, but we were, it was monitoring traffic. And it was looking at what categories, you know, sites were, being categorized as, because we wanted to see what kind of impact that would have. And I want to say it was like, was it 1/3 or 2/3? It was a significant amount of traffic was considered adult, traffic. Now, it was looking at the number of sessions, and so one page might have, you know, 10 or 12 sessions, you know, which could be ads or pictures or videos or whatever. But the amount of bandwidth going back and forth, for the adult category, was significant, way more than what we had anticipated, previous.
Yeah,
So I had to give it up, so.
I think we made the right decision. Okay, something that I read this morning, that Lynn and Eddie are doing a presentation, for your,
Yes.
For open
we're
mic?
gonna be, it's gonna be
Yes.
open mic.
and I saw that it's gonna be videotaped. I'm just wondering, it sounds really interesting. Is that something we could see, or is that something that would be worthwhile to put on our YouTube site?
We do have the slides because they presented it for Bandwidth Week,
Okay,
and then and we're doing it for overnight for the greater staff, but, we can share the slide.
Yeah, I just thought it sounded really interesting and,
There, yeah.
that would be a good thing for us to see. Anyone else? Yes,
So Les and I came here and I saw the candidate forum. And I was standing back in the back table, Nikki was there and I called it in, I don't know the other lady's name that was back there, was controlling the sound and everything. And, they did a great job because there were some issues going on handling that. But a gentleman came up and the hearing loop that we have in there, we just redid that recently, right?
correct.
Yeah, and he came up and he was just so ecstatic at how well that was, not having hearing aids, I don't know what that means and everything. He was just so ecstatic with how well that worked. So he just wanted to point that out and he took the point to do it, so good job on
Yeah.
what's going on there.
Yeah.
Is there a loop?
What is that?
Yeah,
Is that what you call it?
it's a hearing loop and
Yeah.
it's like an inductive coil that's under the carpet. And it connects to our AV system. So anything that's output to the speakers also output. to that.
Was that part of your AV upgrade?
We
What was
had done
that?
that maybe 7 or 8 years ago. But yeah, it always kind of didn't work great with the old system. Now with the new system, it got.
Works.
That's nice, yeah. I saw right there yesterday. It was really crowded and I have to say it was a gorgeous day and 3 local candidates and their opponents all, had a really nice discussion. I thought the League of Women Voters, I know, was putting it on their website. But it was, I was surprised at how well attended it was, frankly, for the day and the Bears and, a lot of other choices. So I think it was Megan Boutier. But anyway. All right. Yes.
I'm just curious, I know the Maker Place Friday experiment ended in
Just,
less than a month ago. Will we hear about that at the next board meeting or will it
Yeah, we
take a
can
little
bring-
longer?
I think we've got the stats for it.
We can provide the staff, we weren't planning on a formal presentation.
Oh, okay,
Roughly the numbers.
okay.
Good. Anyone else? No? All right. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.